Okay, this is our Introduction to Arrays program, which I am now going to review. And you can see the name of the class is Introduction to Arrays, and it has a public static void main. So we're going back a little bit in time to how we used to write console programs, but only for a little bit. So here are a couple ways you can declare an array. If you look here, we have an integer array, and it denotes an array by the square brackets. We give it the name, and we say equals new int square brackets 8. So this creates an integer array with 8 elements in it. You would access the first array element as 0, and the last one would be 7. And an array is, or can be defined as a contiguous storage in memory of the same data type. So this loads in 8 integers all in a row in memory, so it's very fast. But arrays aren't just limited to primitive data types. If you come down here, you will see that we have a string array. Notice the square brackets equals new string, and we have 4 of them. Now let's come down here, and you'll see that we do something a little different. We create an array of doubles, so it loads a bunch of doubles into memory. But you'll notice right here, we don't say how many. So this kind of declares, but does not instantiate yet. And then we have a method, which we just covered not too long ago, where we pass in the string array, and then we have another method called display_to_screen, where we pass in a integer array. And down here, we actually populate the first element of the string array with Brian, and then Daniel, Joseph, and Zoe. And for the integer array, notice we go, even though we have 8 elements, 0 through 7, we put 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and 1,000,000, and so on. And right here we call a method where we pass the array of names, and then we pass in a particular array element. And you can see the difference as we pass in the array element, and here we pass in an array, and here we pass in a particular array element. So I just want to clarify, this passes the whole array, all 8 elements. This just passes in 1. So if we go a little further in our code, you shall see right here we prompt the user for how many elements do you want, and then what we can do is we convert it to an integer, and then that double array that we declared up here, we actually will instantiate it with how many elements that the user just specified. And here's an array that goes through and processes, or populates is a better word, starting at 0 and incrementing by 0.5 all the way up to the high limit of what was entered by the user. So right here we have a property on the array called length that tells us how many array elements. So if I say I enter 100 here, this would have 100, and we want to go from 0 to less than 100, so 0 to 99, and we populate it. And notice we call the good old display_to_screen method, passing in the whole array, and here we pass in just one particular array element. And you'll notice that we have different versions of the display_to_screen. You'll notice this one doesn't return anything, and it's public, and right here it's called display_to_screen, and we take in a string. Notice the square brackets tells us it's an array, and here's its name. And we basically have a for loop that starts at 0 and goes to less than the length. We increment and we put it out to the screen. Here you notice the same name, but what differentiates it between this one and this one is this takes a string array, and this just takes one particular string value. And here we have a display_to_screen, which passes nothing. Notice we also have it here, here, and here. This is where it's overloaded. We take in an integer array, notice the square brackets. And overloading, just to clarify and to review what we talked about before, that is where you have the same method name, but it takes different parameters. And again, here's display_to_screen. The difference between this one and this one is this one takes an integer, one particular value, and this takes an integer array. And we just put up the one value out. And notice what is different between this one and all the others is, yes, it takes a double array, and we put it out to the screen, and this takes one particular array element and processes it. So let's run this and see what happens. Okay, and it's asking me for how many elements I want, and this is used for the double array, so I'm going to put in 100. And we click OK, and let's go up here and look at our output. Okay, you notice right here, the string array is a null, and it's null because it's a string object and we haven't given its value, so it's null. But this is the integer array, and notice before we put values in it, it's all zeros because it's a primitive data type. It knows it can set it to 0. So let's go up here to the code. You notice we declared the integers with 8, all set to 0. We declared it, the string array, with 4, all set to nulls. And we declared this but did not instantiate. So this piece of code here fired off this and this. And notice once we populate the array with Brian, Daniel, Joseph, and Zoe, that can go out to the screen. And here we populate these values. And that code happens here. And you can see this code right here is where I entered 100 and I populated it by 0.5, and you can clearly see where we did that.